The Bentley's engine hadn't even cooled when Brad Kingsley made his first mistake. "Can we get this over with? I have a jet to catch." 25 years old, arms crossed, one leg bouncing like he was waiting for a table at a restaurant rather than facing a judge. His father, William Kingsley, owned pipelines across 3 states. In Brad's mind, that meant he owned this courtroom too. Judge Frank Caprio had just taken his seat. His pen hovered an inch above his desk. He set it down with surgical precision and looked at the young man. "Your schedule is not the jurisdiction of this court." Brad laughed, short, sharp, dismissive. "With all due respect, Your Honor, my schedule is probably worth more than this entire morning's docket." The courtroom went still. The clerk stopped typing. A retired teacher in the gallery gripped her cane tighter. Officer Hollis, standing near the door, shifted her weight. Judge Caprio didn't raise his voice, didn't lean forward. He simply said, "We'll see about that." The clerk read the charges: reckless driving in a residential zone, property damage, verbal harassment of an officer, destruction of a municipal citation, and attempted intimidation of a public servant. 2 prior warnings, both for speeding in school zones, both dismissed with verbal advisories. Brad interrupted before she finished. "Just tell me the fine. I'll triple it. Let's move on." "Mr. Kingsley," Judge Caprio said, "this is not a negotiation. This is a hearing. You will listen to the charges. You will listen to the evidence. You will have your opportunity to speak when I grant it. Until then, you will be silent." Brad smirked. His attorney, Randall Pierce, stood quickly. "Your Honor, my client is prepared to resolve this matter expeditiously." Judge Caprio raised one hand. Pierce sat down. Officer Tara Hollis took the stand. 10 years on traffic enforcement. Calm, composed, unshakable. She described the morning of September 19th. A black Bentley traveling 60 miles per hour in a 25 zone. School buses due in 16 minutes. She activated her lights. The vehicle didn't stop for 4 blocks. When it finally did, the driver exited immediately, without being instructed to. "I identified him as Mr. Bradley Kingsley. I informed him of the speed violation and asked for his license. He said, 'Do you know who my father is?' I replied that I did not. He said, 'He built this city's pipelines. You work because of him.'" Judge Caprio asked if Brad provided his documents. "Eventually. But not before telling me he made more in a week than I made in a year." The body cam audio played. Brad's voice filled the courtroom. "Write your ticket, my lawyers are already on it." Then came Mrs. Eleanor Shaw, 76 years old, 43 years teaching in Providence Public Schools. She walked to the stand slowly, leaning on her cane. She described hearing the car screech to a stop. Gravel and debris struck her glasses. She lost her balance and fell onto her cane. Her hip hurt for days. "Did the driver apologize?" Judge Caprio asked. "No, Your Honor. He looked at me and laughed. Said I shouldn't have been that close to the road." Brad muttered something under his breath. Judge Caprio heard it clearly. Brad had repeated the same words. "She shouldn't have been that close to the road." "Mr. Kingsley," the judge said, "that road is the only one she has. Do you understand that?" Brad said nothing. The clerk read a voicemail received 5 hours after the citation was issued. It was from Kingsley Oil's public relations office, requesting the matter be handled quietly and administratively, given the company's long-standing partnership with Providence. Then an email, subject line, "For the integrity of our partnership," it requested discretion and mentioned mutually beneficial arrangements. Finally, a text message from Brad's phone, sent while Officer Hollis was completing her report. "Got pulled over by some rookie cop. My dad owns half this state. Watch me walk." Brad sat up. "That was private." "It was discoverable," Judge Caprio replied. "Your phone was provided voluntarily. Body cam confirms verbal consent at 6:22 a.m. He looked directly at Brad. Your father's company tried to influence this proceeding before you even appeared in this courtroom. That's not support, Mr. Kingsley. That's obstruction. Brad leaned back and smiled. The smile of someone who believed rules applied to other people. Your Honor, let me save us both some time. This whole city runs on my father's payroll. Half the roads you drive on were paved with Kingsley money. The pipelines under your feet, those are ours. You can't touch me. The air seemed to freeze. Pierce stood. Your Honor, my client misspoke. Judge Caprio raised his hand. Pierce stopped. Mr. Kingsley, I don't enforce your father's payroll. I enforce the law. Those are not the same thing. Brad pressed on. People like you work for people like us. That's just how it is. Judge Caprio set his pen down for the third time that morning. He folded his hands. People like me work for the citizens of Providence. That includes Mrs. Shaw, who you nearly knocked over. That includes Officer Hollis, who you tried to intimidate. That includes every person who drives on roads where you think speed limits are suggestions. Brad's face reddened. You think you can lecture me? My family built... Your family built infrastructure. They did not build immunity. Then, Judge Caprio did something unexpected. He stopped speaking. 5 seconds passed. 7, 10, 12. The silence stretched across the courtroom. Brad shifted in his seat. He uncrossed his arms. He looked at his attorney, who stared straight ahead. He looked back at Judge Caprio, who hadn't moved. Finally, Brad said, What? What do you want me to say? I don't want you to say anything. I want you to understand something. You've mistaken wealth for authority. You've mistaken your father's accomplishments for your own character. You've mistaken the patience of officers and teachers and clerks for weakness. He paused. Those mistakes end here. Brad's bravado, which had filled the room like smoke, began to thin. Judge Caprio's voice softened, not in weakness, but in strategy. Mr. Kingsley, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer honestly. Why do you treat people the way you do? I don't know what you mean. You belittled an officer doing her job. You mocked an elderly woman hurt by your recklessness. You invoked your father's name like a shield. Why? Because it usually works. That's not an answer. That's a defense mechanism. I'm asking why you feel the need to dominate every interaction. Brad looked at the table. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, smaller, uncertain. Because nobody ever tells me no. Nobody. My father's not around much. He's always working. When he is around, he fixes things, makes problems go away. I grew up watching him intimidate people, lawyers, consultants, people who jumped when he walked into a room. I thought that's how you were supposed to be. Feared, Brad nodded. I don't know how to be a person who's not feared. The courtroom shifted. Mrs. Shaw leaned forward. Officer Hollis's expression changed from frustration to something closer to understanding. Judge Caprio said quietly, Fear is not respect, Mr. Kingsley. Fear is what people feel when they can't trust you. Respect is what people give when they can. Judge Caprio opened his bench book. The evidence is overwhelming. Body cam footage confirms reckless driving, verbal intimidation, and destruction of a citation. Traffic cameras confirm you were traveling 60 in a 25 zone. Mrs. Shaw's testimony confirms property damage and physical harm. The text message confirms your belief that wealth would shield you. The communications from Kingsley Oil confirm attempted interference. The base fine totaled $1,450. Brad exhaled. However, Judge Caprio continued, I'm staying half that amount, contingent on completion of a restorative accountability plan. The plan was extensive. 150 hours of community service with the Providence Road Safety Program. Handwritten apology letters to Officer Hollis and Mrs. Shaw. 2 public service announcements on the topic. Wealth isn't a free pass. An ethics course. A 1,000-word reflection essay titled, Respect is Not for Sale. If you complete this plan with integrity, Judge Caprio said, the stayed portion will be waived. If you treat this as a box to check, the full fine will be reinstated with additional penalties. He looked directly at Brad. Mercy is not a discount, Mr. Kingsley. It is a contract. I'm offering you a chance to prove you can learn. Don't waste it. Brad, who had entered the courtroom smirking, now sat with his hands folded, his head bowed. I'll do it. I need this. You don't need this. You need to become the kind of person who doesn't end up here in the first place. This is your opportunity to start. 10 weeks later, Brad returned for his follow-up hearing. He had completed every requirement. 150 hours picking up roadside debris, holding slow-down signs outside schools, assisting at safety workshops. He had written his apologies, both accepted. His PSAs had been viewed over 2 million times. Judge Caprio asked him to summarize what he had learned. Brad stood. The arrogance was gone. I learned that wealth is inheritance, character is earned. I spent 10 weeks picking up trash on the same street where I almost hit Mrs. Shaw. I held signs outside a school where kids walk every day. I listened to parents talk about their fear that someone like me would hurt their children. He paused. Officer Hollis told me the truth that day, and I mocked her. Mrs. Shaw was hurt because of my recklessness, and I laughed. I can't undo that. But I can choose not to be that person anymore. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. Mr. Kingsley, you arrived in this courtroom with money. You leave with something far more valuable. You leave with worth. Brad's voice cracked. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me. Thank Officer Hollis for her professionalism. Thank Mrs. Shaw for her grace. They taught you what your father's money couldn't buy. The case sparked reform. Providence implemented a billionaire contact disclosure protocol. Any corporate communication attempting to influence pending cases would be logged and published publicly. Enhanced sentencing guidelines required mandatory community service for repeat reckless drivers, regardless of their ability to pay fines. Brad continued volunteering, not because he was required to, because he chose to. Years later, at Judge Caprio's retirement ceremony, Brad stood at the podium, the same seat where he'd once sat smirking. 15 years ago, I walked into this courtroom believing I was untouchable. I told Judge Caprio my father owned half the state. I mocked a police officer. I laughed at an elderly woman I'd nearly injured. The audience was silent. Judge Caprio didn't yell. He didn't lecture. He did something far more effective. He made me see myself. He asked me why I treated people the way I did. And when I finally admitted, I didn't know how to be a person who wasn't feared, he said something I've never forgotten. Fear is not respect. Fear is what people feel when they can't trust you. Respect is what people give when they can. Brad looked at Judge Caprio, now in his 80s. Those words saved my life, not because they were harsh, because they were true. He looked back at the audience. I walked into this courtroom with money. I walked out with worth. That trade saved my life. Judge Caprio stood, slowly, walked to the podium and shook Brad's hand. He said quietly, so only Brad could hear, "You did the work. I just pointed the direction." Brad said, "You did more than that. You saved me." Judge Caprio smiled. "You saved yourself. I just gave you the tools." The plaque that now hangs in Providence Municipal Court reads, "In memory of Judge Frank Caprio, you arrive with what you inherit. You leave with what you earn. Justice measured. Mercy strategic. Transformation possible." And below it, a single line summarizing everything he believed. Respect is a renewable resource. Arrogance is not. Dramatization for storytelling and education, not legal advice or reporting.